Hey everybody, how's it going? Well, welcome back. It's once again our time together out here in the old time cave. I know. Hope you guys all had a nice weekend. I'm doing a little bit of an earlier video because this weekend's going to be very busy and I'm going to be just slammed with a lot of stuff, so I'm not going to have much time on Thursday to get around to recording anything or assembling anything or finishing a video. So you're going to get one kind of on the early side. So, you know, coming a little early. But anyways, got a fun cap. I think I've worn this on the channel once before, but this is my City of LA cap. And it's a very comfortable ball cap. Now, a lot of people are like, well, that's not very 40s. That's not very vintage. Well, the baseball cap goes back a long way, actually. And this is an actual patch, and it was attached to the hat because I'm a city employee. And I got a discount on the hat, and they says, you pick out a patch. Well, all right. So I like this one, and they had to put it on there. And I like it. It's very comfortable. It's a nice fitted size, quality actually. So, representing. Anyhow, this piece back here is my NCL, my Nail City Crank Tubular. I've had this on the channel at one time before. It's been a while, but see how tall it is? Can't even get it all the way in the frame. But these, air tubes are really fun because they come up and they join down together to create a square style draft tube with the crinkle corners and all the fun little details of this lantern. It's a great piece. Now, why do they call it a crank tubular? Well, here, let me lower the flame and I can demonstrate. Watch this. See how far that swings out? So you can access the burner, trim the wick, remove the cone, and also fill it up a lot easier with a funnel and nothing gets in the way. So you just crank it back over and you're good. Raise the flame a bit and you're back in business. Now, Nail City Lantern Company, Lantern Stamping Company, they came out right about 1880, I want to say. And they've had an evolution of different designs. And the crank tubular came out right about 1890-ish. And went through clear up to almost 1900. Now, Nail City was based in West Virginia, and about 1900 or just a little before that, they became known as the Wheeling Stamping Company. And A.W. Paul was the president of Nail City, and then the company changed names to Wheeling from Nail City, and then they made, that's right, the Paul's Lantern. So the Paul's Leader Lantern, that has NCL history and heritage. That's right. This is what became Paul's eventually. So if anyone with a Paul's Leader number O style lantern or Paul's Leader, hot blast, you know how the globe swings up? It came from this. That's right. This is the great grandfather of the Paul's Leader lantern. So there you go. Fun bit of history for you. And we're going to move this guy back. But before I do, you probably noticed there's a colored globe in it. That's right. I picked this up over the weekend. It's a Kirkman. That's right, a nice Kirkman number O tubular globe. I know. Where did I get it? Well, W.T. Kirkman, of course, actually. Where else? I happened to go down there to Ramona, California for a weekend. So I went down there on Saturday. And the Kirkmans were having an open house because they had gotten to a point with their showroom where they could have an open house. And it was really nice. They did a beautiful job in there. Woody Kirkman just absolutely hosted very well. And they had some nice light refreshments and entertainment and met some of the other collectors from the group. So that was a lot of fun. And, well, of course, we all sat around and talked shop and lantern history and all sorts of things. And Madison took us on, of course, a little tour through the workshop and the warehouse and everything. And we all obviously found some things that we had to have. And I thought, what a great opportunity to pick up a nice globe from the source and some wick and whatnot. So, yeah. And I've been wanting one of these amber globes for quite some time. And I just haven't, I don't know. I just never got around to ordering one. So I thought, well, I'm here. Might as well pick one up. Perfect opportunity. So it's great, and I'm really excited to have it, and it looks really nice in the Nail City Crank Tubular. It came when I bought this. It came with an amethyst, iridated type of clear globe, so it looks really pretty in this frame. But the amber looks nice as well, I think. Right? Yeah, I think so too. Anyways, this is not the star of the show, not at all. But I will say, since this is a square tube, this will be the introduction to the topic. And now, if you recall last week's video, I sure hope you've seen it and that you watched it, that you enjoyed it. I've gotten some decent feedback from it, and a few more subscribers. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the channel. I hope that you do continue to stay around and enjoy the content that I so humbly oblige and supply you with. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the square air tubes. Some people are like, well, what's with the square tubes? Why did the earlier lanterns have square tubes? And well, if it has square tubes, it's pre this date, and it doesn't go on to further, dates. It's like only this window of time that they made them. No, not exactly. Now the square tubes, it's interesting. Now let's see. We got lanterns to share. And I'll give you a little bit of a timeline history evolution lesson here. Because that's what we do. We share history. And we show evolution. Because thankfully I have a few things that can actually do that. So the history for me is part of the joy. Part of the draw. And once I got into lanterns again, learning the history and the different designs and everything became a lot more interesting than just burning the lantern. Of course I love burning them. They bring a lot of joy, a lot of comfort sometimes, and they make such a warm, soft light, especially one of those amber globes. Tell you, friends, go get one from Kirkman. They're great. You don't want to miss out on those. Those are wonderful. Anyways, shameless plug. So back in the 1870s and 80s, tail end of the 60s, the tubular lantern was patented, and R.E. Dietz's first pattern was 1869. That would be May 4, 1869. Now, you can go back a few videos and see a video about that particular lantern, which I have, which is patented May 4, 1869. And you'll see that first pattern tubular from R.E. Dietz. Prior to that, it was Dietz and Smith, I believe. But Chicago Stamping Company had the first tubular, to my understanding, and then Dennis and Wheeler and so forth. There was a few early companies that kind of fell by the wayside as soon as Dietz really got moving and grooving. But this is an SG&L circa mid-1880s. This is what we call a lift wire. Now, why we call it lift wire is, well, originally the lift tab here was doubled up wire, kind of like this little guy here. Yeah, here on the smoke bell. It was similar to this, same gauge of wire, but it was long and it curved over. So they called it a lift wire, and then the guide wires came down. Well, actually, there were two loops down here that went around the air tubes. I'll insert a picture of an earlier lift wire so you can see what I'm talking about. So right about here, you see that? See the difference? That's 1880, early 80s style lift wire SG&L. Now this one is mid to late lift wire run, because they went from the wire to the sheet metal tab. See that? And you just pull up on this and raise the globe. Very simple. And you push down on that to lower the globe, and you're good to go. How do you extinguish it? Because this will get a little warm, you could just turn the wick down and it goes out. Basic. Very simple stuff. Very simple stuff. Very easy to light, very easy to manage. And you remove the globe like this, and then the globe plate is hinged on the front, so it flips up like that. See? Kind of cool, right? And it's brass cone, brass burner, all the typical stuff. That's right. Oh, gee, Rob, how come you're not cleaning the globe on this? Well, because when it burns, it looks really cool. I like the atmosphere that this creates. And this thing was found hanging in a barn in Maine. That's why there's still string up here. It's not holding anything together. It was just holding the lantern to a rafter in a barn in Maine. That's what the seller told me. It was where they found it, was in Maine, in some old barn on a well-to-do family property that was an estate sale. But anyways, it has a cool history from being from Maine and probably hanging in that barn for 100 plus years. Easily that. Because this is from the mid-1880s, at least. So, but this is the frame of a tubular lantern up until that point. So before the square tubes, you had these corners, and it looked like plumbing. The round tubes soldered in the seam. They have a solder seam here, round little joints, and it looks just like plumbing. That's why the term tubular lantern came out, is because these were tubes. Very basic, very simple. So this is what an SG&L lantern looked like prior to 1890, and this is it. just like this. Same kind of construction and frame from the late 1860s to the 1880s. And now SG&L wasn't around that early. SG&L came out around right about 1880. So there we go. This is what came before the square tube. Now, since we don't have a lot of room on the bench, we'll move on to this one. Now, this is what we call the square lift. And this is a first generation square lift. It says square lift tubular right there on the back. Okay? See that? Yeah. Now, this one's it's in original condition. Sometime the spout was broken and a cork was replaced by the cap was replaced by a cork. But anyways, I love the way this thing looks. It's beautiful. But this is what we call a pinch lift, because later square lifts, you've seen them, they have a tab on the top and you push it up, you pull it up just like that lift wire. Exactly like the lift wire, but a little shorter, a little refined, but this is a pinch lift. So you go like this. See that? And you have a bend in the wire and a little tab up here. It's very similar to the high-low. Okay? Very similar to the high-low. And then you can access your cone and your burner just like that. Okay? But this is the first generation square lift and the first iteration with, square tubes. That's right. Now, if you notice closely, how does the globe stay up without falling back down? Well, this wire here has a bend in it. See the subtle bend? See how it's kind of like a lightning bolt bend in there? But the other one doesn't. It's straight, more or less. It's a straight wire. This one has a bend. So once it gets past this loop, it locks it in place. Genius, simple design. It really is. But this is the first generation square tube lantern. Why did they change? Why did they go from elbows and tubes to this? Well, progress. Just a different design, different style. But I would say this. You could get square tube in long sections, and all you had to do was cut it right there. You can see the folds. See there where the solder is? So they would score it, and then they would bend it, and then make this frame. So it was a lot easier to do than putting little elbow joints on them and soldering them. That was a little more complicated. It was very well made, handmade. I mean, everything was handmade back in those days. There wasn't no label saying handmade in the USA because that was the only option, But anyways, the square tube was a little more simplistic to make. It was very simplistic to make compared to that, and it saved time, and you can make a pretty rigid frame, and people like this. Dietz kind of fell in love with this design, and I believe it was John Dietz that really liked the square tube design. That reason why it kind of existed into the 20th century. But anyways, we'll get on to that soon. But this is your very first generation, to my understanding, square lift tubular. Now, why is it called a square lift? The frame is square. I mean, it doesn't get more simpler than that. The whole framework is absolutely square. Square tubes, square frame, it's a square, essentially. I mean, it's a rectangle. No, essentially, a rectangle is just an elongated square. But square tubes and a lift mechanism that's mounted to the side of the tubes means square lift. That's where the name came from. It's very simplistic. Nothing crazy. But this is the first start, which came out right about 1890. That's right. Tail end, I think these were patented right around 88, 87, 88, but they weren't manufactured until right about 1890, so the experts have told me. So there we go. Square lift tubular, first generation square tube Dietz. And of course, SG&L by this point, they were part of Dietz. Dietz had about 30% holdings with SG&L by 1890, to my understanding. So, they used the same patterns, essentially. Now, moving along through the 1890s, Dietz. Square tubes. Everything had square tubes. Everything. Except for the Dietz Best. The Dietz Best continued to have a round tube design up until maybe mid-decade. And then they went to square tubes for maybe a couple of years. So if you find a Dietz Best tubular with square tubes, snap it up. Very hard to come by. I know friend and subscriber, Matt Cumberledge, does have such a beast. He has such a thing in his collection. Mainly because I didn't feel like buying it, and I told him about it. I'm such a nice guy. I'm teasing you. Anyways, yeah, those are really hard to find. So if you find a Dietz Best tubular with square tubes, definitely pick it up. Or one with round tubes, pick that up as well. But the Best was mostly known as a round tube lantern that had similar design as that lift wire that I shared. Anyways. By 1899, the Dietz Royal became a round tube lantern. Same frame as the Monarch that came along in 1900. So some of the lanterns towards the end, very, very end of the 90s, started toying with and showing off round tubes that they were stamped, they were crimped together, that we become very familiar with later on. But anyways, you know the old Dietz Hilo? You remember this guy? Of course you do. Well, the first pattern Hilos were round tubes. They came out 1910s, right around 1911, 12, right in there. And they were round tubes. They were pretty much a Dietz Monarch without a side lift. But right around 13, 14, they look like this. That's right. Good old John Dietz felt that the Hilo should have square tubes. So the Dietz was made for only a handful of years with square air tubes. And if you're familiar with the Dietz Victor of that generation, because the Victor continued to be made clear into the 1940s, some of them. They didn't drop the Victor from the catalog, I think, until the 1930s. Once the Depression hit, they kind of streamlined their catalog product line. But the Hilo, right around prior to World War I, was having square tubes until the death of John Dietz. And then when he passed on, then they went back to round tube, because well, he's not around anymore. Well, let's go back to the round tube because it's cheaper, it's more cost effective, I should say, and faster to produce that way. These definitely by the 19-teens and 1920s took a lot more time to make. Even though this was what replaced the other earlier design with the round tubes and the elbow pieces, that was still more expensive and time consuming to make. This replaced that, but this was by the 1910s more expensive to make. It's interesting how the earlier designs become more expensive to make as more economical designs come out. It's interesting to study that. But anyways, the Dietz Hilo, right there, square air tube Dietz Hilo. If you find one of these and it's in decent shape, snag it. They're not easy to find. They're beautifully just fun lanterns. This one now, of course, is missing a wire little loop clip on this side, but I did kind of a homebrew farmer fix with old baling wire, and so it functions just as it should. You know, it's a Hilo. It's easy. But anyways, it holds fuel great and it works. And I love this thing with its old tired green Pullman color paint. It's got a irradiated amethyst tint Dietz Fit All pre-lock knob globe, which is proper for this piece. But anyways, well, is that it? Is that when they stopped making square air tubes? No. Coming to the 1920s, you still had the Dietz Victor. I don't have a late run Victor to show you. I have 1890s ones that I love, but that's it. But anyways, we do have a post-teens square tube Dietz, and that would be this guy. That's right, the Dietz Mill. The Dietz Mill, right? Yeah, we all know the Dietz Mill, right? Square lift design, cage, burner, locking loops, and all that jazz. That's right. Underwriter's lamp, as they've been known to be called. Yeah, snaps right into place. But the square tube is reinforced too. On top, they have a cross plate for reinforcement, and on the inside too. And they, of course, the crimp on the inside to connect the two sides is crimped and soldered. But, yeah, brilliant piece. And then, of course, the wire struts are, there's a notch. So they fit in the notch, and then they're soldered into place to the skirt for rigidity and strength. Because hanging around in a mill, you're kind of asking for it. You know, you're going to be in the way of things and projectiles and who knows what kind of work that will cause damage to lighting. So these were definitely caged and locked to keep also employees from lighting their cigarettes or cigars off of. But anyhow, these are really great, old, sturdy, rigid lanterns. And the square tubes do give an image of strength and rigidity. They look substantial and stately. They really do. But this is 1929 we're talking. Okay? What other lanterns did Dietz have by 1929 still had square tubes? Mill, Victor, Dietz OK, Acme Inspector. I think that's it. That's right. The Acme Inspector. Got one right over here. Give me a sec. All right. This one is going into just the early war period. This is my Southern Pacific marked Dietz Acme Inspector lamp. It's got the mercury reflector. Nice old patina. Acme Inspector. Nice convenient handle for pointing at a potential hot box. Anyways, this one's stamped
1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but I did look at it. It is 1941. I forget the month, but it is 41. But this one here, as you can see, has creases, just like the high-low. So the high-low used pretty much the Victor tubes. So by the 19-teens, early 1900s into the teens, they started putting a crimp or a crease into the air tubes for rigidity and strength. And the same thing with the Acme Inspector. And these are shadowed by another piece of metal, strip metal, soldered to the exterior for extra strength and rigidity. So they were reinforced. That's right, because it was a bigger frame. You can see how much wider the cross section is than, say, the high-low or Victor, because you had to have this thing. So they made these wider to accommodate the reflector shield or the shroud. So yeah, very substantial lantern, heavy lantern. These are heavy, but great pieces. And they made this lantern. Dietz made the Acme Inspector, I believe, as well as the Trackwalker into the 1950s. And I know that this was made clear into the early 1960s, to my understanding, what I've been told. Virtually unchanged from this pattern. That's right. Didn't change from the 40s all the way through the 60s. Now, prior to the 1910s, this had a loop handle and a smaller fill cap and some of the earlier attributes of, say, a pre-1900 Victor and stuff. But yeah, this pattern, once they got the reinforced air tubes and the larger fill cap and everything, virtually the same lantern, the entire product run until the early 60s or late 50s. Now, that's it for square tube lanterns. Wait a minute. What do you mean? Really? Other companies had square tube lanterns? Well, that's interesting. I never thought of that. What do you mean they did? Oh, you're right. They did. Now, here's one that I like to share once in a while. This is a bull number O tubular. This is the other style that a lot of the other companies were trying to get away with. Square tubes, but with an extra bend. So we call these coffin corners because, well, it kind of looks like a coffin shape, right? Collectors have funny terms for these things that just kind of catch on. But Canada was also doing similar styles. And square tubes definitely were not generally just SG&L or Dietz. They were imitators. And Buell, as well as Mayrose, and I think a couple Canadian lantern companies as well were doing square air tubes. And, well, the Canadian ones were safe because they were in Canada, but the American companies were definitely pursued by Dietz because that was a copyright infringement. Yes, it was. Indeed. Now, I don't have it out here right now, but the CT Ham D tube, or oval tube as it's properly known, was CT Ham's version of the square tube, but since it had a flat side but an arched interior curve, they were not, threatened by Dietz. There was other design attributes that they tried to release that became kind of Dietz's point of contention at sometimes. But anyways, we'll do a patent infringement type of video in the future. However, Buell did make square tube lanterns for several years, but Dietz kept chasing after him, and they just settled out of court, and they finally got tired of it, and they stopped making them because they kind of fell out of fashion. But, you know, Dietz was a slave to tradition and continued making square tube lanterns clear into the 1930s and 40s and 50s. But only select models, of course. But yeah, Buell got in trouble with Dietz. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Excuse me. Excuse me. There we go. Got too much going on here, friends. I got just too much crap. Okay, I don't. But anyways, so that's kind of the rundown on the square tube. It was very prominent in the 1890s, from about 1890 to the early 1900s. And as I mentioned, Dietz had, well, they had the rights and patents to those square tube designs, and they definitely were very protective of them. And they made, by the mid-1920s, they only had a select few lanterns that had square tubes, such as the Little Star, the Victor, the Acme Inspector, the Mill Lantern, the Dietz OK. They had 5 or 6 lanterns total that still retain air tubes that were square, that they were making prior to 1900. Now, of course, the tubes had those creases added for extra strength. So they even evolved along the way. But, you know, we see square air tubes and we think Old West. We think 1890s. Sometimes we think 1880s, but that's not accurate. No, it's not. Although we do see sometimes a square tube lantern in a Western film once in a while, and we're always like, oh, that looks so good. It looks so natural in that setting. And of course it does. But it definitely looks more natural than a streamlined Monarch. Anyways, if you've seen any 50s TV shows, like Western shows from the 50s and 60s, even Little House on the Prairie, you cannot avoid seeing a streamlined Dietz lantern, either a D-Light, Little Wizard, or a Monarch. They're in there. They're absolutely in Bonanza. You know, the Western TV shows and films definitely did not get their oil lantern history down at all. But a lot of them would just go like, set dressers, where do you get a kerosene lantern? Oh, go to the hardware store. And they bought brand new ones. That's all it is. And if you watch Gunsmoke, outside of some of the buildings, you'll see streamlined Monarchs with practically galvanized buckets or panning. I think they're buckets. Yeah, they cut buckets and fit them around the air tubes of the Monarchs so they look like, you know, side lamps or, beacons or searchlights type of deal. You know, that they just went with that kind of design aesthetic, but they made them with buckets, you know, around Monarchs. Anyways, another film for another day. TV Western lanterns. Anyways, I hope this was of some help to you guys in dating your lantern, and maybe understanding that just because it has square tube doesn't mean that it's a very early piece, that it could definitely date post 1900 or clear into the 1950s sometimes. So that's been my game, that's been my goal, and my intentions with this video is to help broaden your horizons and understanding to lantern enlightenment. That's right. Yeah, well, we are a most enlightening YouTube channel, right? That's right, we are. All right, friends. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition out here with me in my rustic old garage. I call it Time Cave. And this old nice NCL with the Kirkman globe. Definitely give their website a look. I'll drop a link into the description field, and you can look at W.T. Kirkman's product line of their replacement globes and all the parts that they offer for antique lanterns, and also their product line of newly manufactured kerosene burners and lamps. Absolutely do that. So we'll do till next week about the same time. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week and a wonderful weekend, and enjoy your Memorial Day safely, but well, of course. All right, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.